Hello and welcome to my weekly video roundup, coming to you today from Cranhill Development Trust's Community Garden. You've got a double whammy this week, since last Friday's sitting of Parliament meant that I was unable to put out a weekly video roundup. So there's a lot to fit in, so let's get started, starting with the Brexit breakdown. So last Friday was supposed to be the day the UK left the EU. Theresa May told MPs over 100 times that the 29th of March was the day. And yet here we are after she has yet again kicked the can down the road. At the start of last week, Theresa May gave a statement to MPs about the next steps for Brexit, in which she told us nothing, refused to admit that her deal is dead, and stalled for time. Later that day, MPs voted to take control of business in the House of Commons, delivering yet another crushing defeat to the Prime Minister.
So it's just gone 11 o'clock in the House of Commons. We've just finished voting on a series of amendments, and crucially tonight Parliament has voted to take back control. 30 Tory rebels, 3 ministerial resignations, and a humiliating defeat for Theresa May.
On the Wednesday, MPs then took control of business in the House of Commons for the first of 2 special sittings to hold indicative votes which were intended to help break the Brexit deadlock. After voting on options ranging from leaving the EU with no deal to holding a second referendum, the results were inconclusive. No one option resulted in an overall majority, and quite shamefully, over 100 Labour MPs sat on their hands and abstained on the SNP motion that would have revoked Article 50 if it were the case that the UK comes within one day of a catastrophic no-deal Brexit. Amid the confusion, only one thing was abundantly clear: Westminster isn't working for Scotland.
So it's 11 o'clock here in the House of Commons. We've not long finished a series of indicative votes on Brexit, and Parliament has thus far been unable to come to a conclusion on how it wants to move forward. But one thing has been consistent: it's been the SNP's position since the 2016 referendum on our membership of the European Union. We voted as a country by 62% to remain in the European Union, and what we see is the British government dragging Scotland out of the EU against its will, which is simply unacceptable.
That wasn't the only thing that happened though. While we were gearing up for the votes, the beleaguered Prime Minister was in front of her own Tory backbenchers, promising to resign if they backed her deal. This last desperate roll of the dice was summed up rather quite well at First Minister's questions last week.
You know, it is traditional in politics, it's traditional for leaders to say to colleagues, you know, if you don't back me on an issue of such importance, I might have to resign. Not in the Tories though. Theresa May's position is, if you don't back me, I'll stay. You know, Theresa May must be the only leader in living memory who has tried to fall on her own sword and has managed to miss. It is utterly ridiculous.
Now, while I hope this video roundup is a useful tool to convey the key information about what's going on down there, I don't think it gets across quite the absolute chaos and the shambolic nature of how business is being carried out. MPs have been left wondering all week whether or not the Prime Minister was, as rumoured, going to try and bring back her deal last Friday for another vote. It wasn't until 5 PM last Thursday that we found out for sure what was happening the next morning. Now, I've got no problem being down there when it's necessary and in the interest of my constituents, but the reality is it need not be like this. The way the government is handling business isn't just inconvenient as it is, it's downright disrespectful to Scotland. So, how do the Tories react when they're called out? With their trademark condescension of Scottish MPs.
The way that this government has so disrespected those of us all who have great distances to go. This is announced this morning, to confirm this morning that we would be sitting in this House is actually totally acceptable, and I'm looking forward to the Honourable Gentleman agreeing with me.
Nobody's forcing the Honourable Gentleman to be here.
Let's go!
Do you know, Mr. Speaker, this is just part of the pattern that we expect from the Honourable Gentleman. Just go home, go away.
Here's the point. My entire diary had to change for Thursday and Friday of last week. I had house visits planned for vulnerable and disabled constituents. I had engagements around the East End I had to pull the plug on. I had to cancel meetings that were arranged months ago. And the reaction from the Tory benches is total derision. This isn't just disrespectful to me and my constituents, it shows absolutely no regard for hard-working staff in the House of Commons who have had to cancel their plans at last minute to come into work. clerks, kitchen staff, security and others, all left to deal with the repercussions of a government incapable of governing. And what was it all for? Well, last Friday the Prime Minister brought back her Brexit package, or rather half of it, for a vote that wasn't actually meaningful. Predictably, Theresa May was defeated yet again. That's now 3 strikes for her dead duck deal.
And I suggest to the Prime Minister, we now must look seriously at the option of revocation. We need to apply the handbrake to this process. And quite simply, Mr. Speaker,
You've messed it up.
the Prime Minister has failed to take this deal forward. She does not have the confidence of the House. The Prime Minister has indicated her departure. She should now go, and we should be having a general election.
The indicative votes process hasn't been any more successful, with round 2 of Monday proving inconclusive yet again. The threat of no deal and the cliff edge that would cause for the economy is something that we're not willing to countenance. So really disappointed that once again we've come here, we've stood up, we've made a voice for Scotland, and once again we've been ignored by the Westminster Parliament, and that just seeks to reaffirm my view that the House of Commons doesn't listen to people in Scotland. It didn't listen when we voted 62% to remain in the European Union. It's not listened in the first round of indicative votes. It's not listened tonight. And once again we see a stalemate on Brexit, all the while Scotland's caught up in it. The next day the Prime Minister bunkered down in number 10, seemingly holding her cabinet hostage until a way forward could be thrashed out. 7 hours later, this was the best they were able to come up with.
I'm offering to sit down with the Leader of the Opposition and to try to agree a plan that we would both stick to ensure that we leave the European Union and that we do so with a deal.
The Prime Minister has ignored the other parties for almost 3 years now, yet suddenly she wants to reach out to Labour while still ignoring Scotland's government and the majority of Scottish MPs. Regardless of how you voted in the EU referendum, this is a slap across the face for Scotland. Remember being told this repeatedly in 2014?
The future for Scotland is not leaving the United Kingdom, it is leading the United Kingdom, and that's what we're going to do.
Well, it's pretty hard to lead when you're strapped into the passenger seat and the driver is ignoring you. So, where are we now? Well, secretive talks are ongoing between May and Corbyn whilst the clock ticks down to the 12th of April when we're due to crash out of the EU without a deal. On Wednesday, MPs took over the House of Commons again, this time to pass a bill instructing the Prime Minister to seek an extension to Article 50 to avoid this calamity. All stages of that legislation were rushed through in one day and made their way to the House of Lords yesterday, where unelected bureaucrats tried to stop it by filibustering the debate. They've managed to slow down its passage, and it's now due back in the unelected, unaccountable House of Lords for further debate on Monday, less than 4 days before disaster is due to strike. So what next? As usual, the UK government has no clue. They really are making this up as they go. Easter recess has been cancelled for MPs next week, but parliamentary business so far is incredibly provisional. We really have no idea what to expect, and the British government has no clue what it's doing. Before I wrap up the Brexit breakdown, I want to let you know that my website now has a dedicated Brexit section giving you rolling updates on the situation. If you've been confused by any part of the process, then this aims to help you stay informed. Simply visit davidlinden.scot/Brexit. The Scottish Tories' loose grip of reality wasn't restricted to their submissive approach to Brexit recently. I challenged one of them on the rise in demand for food banks, which has been caused by their regressive social security policies. It takes a lot to shock me, but even I was taken aback with this answer.
You spoke earlier on about high rankings in Forbes magazine. Can you tell us where the UK rates in terms of food bank usage?
See, that is actually the difference between you and I, because I actually consider that the fact that there are food banks there to support people is an example of people being charitable and wanting to support people. And I want to celebrate the success of this country. I want to celebrate the success of this country, not the failure.
So apparently food banks are a sign of how great the UK is. I doubt you'd find many people happy with their donations or volunteer work to be twisted like this to fit an out of touch and delusional Tory narrative. I spent countless hours in my office this week dealing with cases for constituents. I've noticed DWP cases rising exponentially as the UK government's botched universal credit rollout bites in the East End. Let me tell you, anyone who tries to spin food banks as a symbol of the strength of this society is deliberately misleading or hopelessly ignorant. On another note, during one of those late night Brexit sittings this week, I raised again the issue of electronic voting in the House of Commons, highlighting the unfairness of the current system on the hard-working staff in the building.
Mr. David Linden.
Mr. Speaker, at 21:54 tonight we started a process of votes and it has taken us until almost 11:30 this evening. Now, of course, I would make my usual point about electronic voting and how much more efficient this process could be. But there is a serious point to this, Mr. Speaker, because the catering staff, the teller, the clerks, all the other staff of the House have been dragged here until 11:30 tonight. Surely now members sitting in this House would know we need to move into the 21st century and have electronic voting.
For an idea of just how ridiculous Westminster's voting procedure is, check out Sarah Mackey's excellent comparison video which shows how it takes almost 18 times longer to vote in Westminster than it does in the Scottish Parliament. The link for that is above this video. I've also been banging the drum about other kinds of votes. Votes at 16, something young people can do in Scotland for Holyrood and council elections, but not for Westminster elections, purely because the UK government refuses to move with the times.
Because the night before polling day I was working at Glasgow Credit Union at the time, and I remember sitting on the subway and I'd just been given my pay slip, and I was looking at my pay slip and the bit about net pay and tax paid and thinking, you know, I'm heading out tonight to deliver eve of poll leaflets for an election. I'll spend all of tomorrow out campaigning, but I've paid tax to a government that I can't actually vote for. And that's the ridiculous situation about this, is that we're asking young people who pay tax to a government that's spending that tax on the health service or whether it's going to work, but they don't have that position or the ability to influence that.
That wasn't the only debate I spoke in about my own personal experience. This week I've also been championing infant first aid training for parents.
And the last thing that we did is we took my daughter home was to practice on a dummy about how to do CPR, and that's an incredibly stark experience, because on one hand, you know, you're there as a dad, getting to take your daughter home. You've been on the neonatal unit and you've put all of your trust in these staff, and you've got to go home. And it did strike me as I was preparing for this debate that it's all good and well that we're providing that CPR training and we're getting to practice in a dummy, but even now we're not getting to a stage where we've had the full kind of infant first aid training course.
As you can imagine, my time back up in the constituency has been restricted over the past couple of weeks, but I've done my utmost to get out and about. Today kicked off with my regular surgery at Cranhill Development Trust. I've also been visiting Calvi Housing Association to help resolve a constituent case, made a visit to Drax Group's biomass from waste facility in Dildowie, had a meeting with the Association of British Credit Unions, and worked my way through an absolute mountain of paperwork, emails and correspondence. So that's me for this week. As ever, please don't hesitate to get in touch if you need my help. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Have a good weekend.